Welcome to another episode of the Speakeasy podcast, powered by HireEasy and the Outbound Recruiting Academy. I am so excited for our special guest, Tabitha the Recruiter Kavanaugh. She's the Vice President of Recruiting and Talent Strategy, and she is an advocate for transformative conversations and meaningful connections. With a core belief to have those kinds of conversations daily, striving to always leave each person better than she found them. Her journey into recruiting and talent strategy stems from her dedication to challenging the status quo and transforming the recruitment experience. Inspired by her faith and driven by a desire to make a positive impact, Tabitha brings a fresh perspective to the world of talent acquisition. And I'm so excited to dive in to her experience and how she shares it with the recruiting community. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's awesome to be here. Love having conversations with you. So this is going to be fun.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey into the world of recruiting. I'm sure everybody knows you on LinkedIn and your special posts, but help us understand what you're currently doing, how you got to where you're at, and a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, like most recruiters, I kind of face planted into the industry. I came from sales and really just at the core of it was people, right? It was relationship building and all that good stuff. So, after going through colon cancer and chemotherapy, I kind of came to the other side of that and was like, okay, what now? And I again accidentally fell in. I saw a post on Facebook in a mom's group. Somebody was looking to hire at an agency. And I thought, well, this seems to be the skill set I have. So let me go for it. And the short of it is, I interviewed, got that role, and 7 years ago had my start in recruitment. And it's been a wild ride, as you know, ever since. Recruitment is a bit crazy. We're generally the first to go when things in the market shift, companies go on hiring freezes. And so it's been a little bit of a ride, right? I've gone from agency to corporate, back to agency, where I am now in sort of an RPO agency model at the Sales Collective. We do sales coaching and training to, simply put, I guess I could say. And so here I'm building out the first recruitment vertical, helping our clients hire for sales because sales is a really challenging area to hire for and get it right. It's exciting to be here, just using my skills over the years that I've just continued to build and the resilience from getting laid off, and just keep going, right? That's all we can do as recruiters. So yeah.
You have a quote that really stuck with me, and that's why I reached out initially on LinkedIn. I've been seeing your posts, I've been seeing the positivity that you kind of preach to the community, but you have a goal that you want to leave each person better than you found them in conversations that you have with them. Walk me through that approach and why why do you feel so strongly about doing that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thanks for calling that out. It just stuck with me. It's kind of always been my mantra without having the words to go along with it. And then over the years, it just kind of came to me that this is what I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. What I wanted to do is leave each person better than I found them. And if I could do that, there was always a cool outcome. And then I kind of worked backwards from that. And it's how I set expectations with my hiring managers, my candidates. I always start there and say, listen, I don't know what the outcome here is. So let's agree on that. Let's just agree that we don't know what that's going to look like. And there's a chance that you might not end up with this job. Okay. If we start there. But knowing that if we go through this process with that mentality, then something good can come from this. Maybe it's that your resume looks better than it did when you entered this process. Maybe it's that, you were open and transparent with me. So I was able to make a really aligned connection, an introduction for you. Maybe it's that we connected today and in 2 years from now, we come back and you get a job at the company that you were striving for before. There are so many different outcomes it's impossible to name them all. But that's one of my favorite things is just, I feel like that statement always allows me to meet each person exactly where they are with no script, nothing set in stone. It's just like, this is what our goal is going to be. And from that, I promise something good is going to come out of it. And it always has. And that's been really, really fun.
You touched on you went to the agency, then corporate life, then back to agency. Any specific advice would you give to somebody that's trying to make that pivot back and forth, especially in this day and age in 2024? Some recruiters gonna have to make that pivot to land that next role in the competitive nature of recruiting 2024. Walk us through that journey and some insights for the audience of what they could do to help transition to that pivot.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest differences between agency and corporate is the business development. So you hear of like full desk recruitment when you're the one that's required to go out and find the business and then fill that position. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest differences and one of the things that might be a little bit more of a hurdle from someone, let's say, trying to go from corporate to agency if you don't have that experience. But again, it's all about illustrating your transferable skills. So where have you done some type of business development? I mean, there's always, in some form or fashion, some type of business development in recruitment because you're trying to either sell, pitch the story to a candidate or influence your hiring managers. So it's really all about telling the right story, connecting those right dots when you're trying to make that pivot. When I was laid off in 2023 from a startup that I had joined as the inaugural talent acquisition leader, it was frustrating because I was applying and my resume normally works for me and I wasn't hearing back. And so I ultimately took some other skills in recruitment that I was using too, which was employer branding. It was designing and writing, taking those skills that I have and making that pivot into an employer branding role. I ended up doing global employer branding for Baxter Healthcare for a handful of months on a contract before I got back into recruitment here at the Sales Collective. So it's always just thinking about what do you do day to day in your role and what have you done throughout recruitment or even before that, being in sales and marketing, like it's all connected. And so, as recruiters, we know like we have a plethora of skills from project management to relationship building, all the things in between. And so just being able to talk about those things in a way that showcases the outcomes that you've been able to provide. And that's really the connection point.
You talked about employer branding, and sometimes that coincides with your personal branding. You have almost 46,000 followers on LinkedIn. Walk me through the rise of followers that you've experienced over the last couple of years and you creating your personal brand that goes well with whatever employer brand you're trying to have that narrative be whatever company you're working for.
Yeah. So in my experience, it has always helped me. Ultimately, people have looked at my brand on LinkedIn and have thought this can be an asset to our company. Now, I will say not every company recognizes that or appreciates that. Sometimes they see it as some type of weird competition or somehow going to negatively affect their company. And sure, I guess it can if the voices don't align. So that's why I put myself out there the way that I do, very clearly as I can anyway, because that allows me to attract and repel the right companies at the right time. So if I talk very vaguely about who I am, then a company might mistake me for the right person for their organization when I'm really not. So I try to be as clear as day as who I am as a person, who I am as a recruiter, what I care about. And that way we can tell pretty easily if our values align. So I got into recruitment 7 years ago. I very quickly kind of established this whole Tab the Recruiter brand. It was sort of on accident. I can't even tell you the story because I don't really remember exactly how it went down, other than I thought it sounded kind of cool, turned it into a hashtag, and then it just kind of became a thing. But from there, again, it was all about telling my truth over and over again. And sometimes that kind of bled outside of the recruitment lines. And sometimes I was talking about cancer. Sometimes I was talking about my faith and sort of blending those things together in this sort of like humanity, like just caring about people type of way. I just wanted to give back to the community. And that is how I organically built it. I don't have a couple 100,000 followers like some people out there. I'm not really worried about the numbers. I never have been. I just feel like if I keep putting the message that's on my heart out there, then it always finds the right person. And even if that day the message I put out, let's say reaches one right person and they message me and they say, "You were the first post in my feed. I needed that today. Thank you." I'm like, my job is done. You know what I mean? I feel like it just needs to find the right person, and it always does. And so, that's kind of been my approach to building. If that leads to more followers, great, but only as long as it's creating an impact, because if it's not doing that, then I don't care. I'd rather have 5 followers, you know what I mean? I think it's all about impacting one right person at a time, and then that ripples out, and let that person impact somebody else, and then so on and so forth.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people out there that are chasing for likes versus chasing for impact. And the impact is sustainable. Likes aren't, because you could get stripped from your LinkedIn seed or other social media seats just like that. And the impact will sustain for generations to come if you're putting out the right contact and building other people for success.
Yeah.
Over the years, the recruiting landscape has undergone significant changes, especially the last, 18 months. How have you witnessed the evolution of recruiting practices, and what do you believe are the key drivers behind those changes?
Yeah, like I said, recruiters are always the first to go. I feel like we get the brunt of whatever the market changes are happening. Companies in an employer driven market, it feels like all of a sudden some of those things like DEIB don't matter anymore, right? Because they have an influx of candidates and we can do whatever we want type of mentality. And when it's candidate driven, it's more like, okay, what can we do as a company to attract the right kinds of people? Um, and that's the value that I try to hold in regardless of what the market looks like, is always creating that value in the alignment. That's where you find longevity, right? Which is where a lot of companies struggle with retention and things like that because they're just hiring bodies. And they're like, oh, we grew our sales org by 300% in the last 2 years. Oh, great. But what are you doing with that? And how many of those people are still sitting in those seats? How many of those people are happy? Because in sales specifically, if you're not having fun and if you're not enjoying what you're doing, how well do you think that you're selling for that company? Right? Like, probably not great. In fact, only about 2 out of 10 sales hires actually even make it to the top half performing part of their organization overall. And now, of course, that'll vary by company, but generally that's the stat. 75% of sales hires fail. So this is kind of what we're seeing in the market. It's always ebbing and flowing. We have the introduction now more so of AI. But I mean, for years I've heard the argument that, oh, is my resume going to pass the ATS? That's always been a huge concern of candidates. And ultimately, what most recruiters have said, and I am in big circles of recruiters, we all talk to each other. It's like we're all still very much manually looking at these resumes. We might have some AI, of course, to help us, and I think there are some better tools coming out nowadays. But, at the end of the day, kind of a person evaluating another person. So, yeah, there's always gonna be something happening in the market, and for me, that's why it's always just come back to how well am I building those relationships and how well am I leaving each person better than I found them, and a quick example is, I just had someone that I helped to hire. It was part of her hiring process. I brought her into the company. She was a transitioning teacher and she just celebrated 2 years yesterday with the company that I helped to hire her at. And to me, that just makes my heart so happy. Despite tools and all the changes in the market, it's like when you're doing the right things foundationally and your people are, say my people, but your people are like still there multiple years later, growing and thriving and getting recognition for doing their thing well. I mean, I don't know. Is there anything better than that in recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to go back and remember that we're a people business and we need to put people first, because that's what's going to be sustainable. So you did employer branding, now you're doing recruiting again. How did you create those different opportunities for yourself? And how did you develop those skills that are transferable within different organizations or different skill sets or titles?
Yeah. So in every recruitment role, because again, we wear a lot of hats, even in my first recruitment role at the agency that I started with, I saw a need for people to learn how to grow a presence on LinkedIn. So I created a presentation. I showed it to my boss and ended up getting to present it company wide during some different training opportunities that, we were having there. Um, and that was kind of where it all started. And from there, I kept iterating on that. We'll just go with that example for right now. I kept iterating on the LinkedIn process, what I was doing, how I was optimizing my profile, how I was posting, which posts were doing well. And I kept doing that for every company that I would work for. Cause I would just come in and be like, hey, by the way, and I didn't wait for them to ask me. I figured out, okay, there's a need here. I'm doing this well. One of the things they value when they hired me was that I'm doing LinkedIn well. So why not try to extend that to the entire organization? What that led to was, at one of my previous employers was globally presenting this over 3 different sessions to over 700 employees. That was nerve-wracking because I'm like, "Oh, man, globally, like, I've never done it at this scale before," but it went over really, really well, and even today, years later, I see people from that company always checking out my LinkedIn profile. So it's like figuring out the ways that you can add value. I love to write. I love to wordsmith. So for me, that transitioned into helping to write better job ads to attract higher caliber candidates that were more aligned with what the company was wanting and convincing them, influencing them to realize that, you don't need to attract everyone. We don't need to see 700 applications. Let's see 45 really good ones. So it was always just about finding that next thing that aligned with what I really love to do. I like to design. So when Canva came out, oh my gosh, I love Canva. That became something that I could use to, I saw, oh, we're going to have an employee appreciation day. Cool. Let me design something for that and show somebody, right? My leader, the marketing team, whoever the right person was at that org, and say, what do you think about this? Or like, hey, I see that we don't have anything that announces when new employees are joining our company, but that could be a really cool thing to increase engagement. Have them post about when they join, have us post and celebrate that they've joined. Now we have this new piece of content. So I created a template. In some cases, I created it by myself. In other cases, I collaborated with marketing to make it happen. But ultimately, recruitment marketing is never on the forefront. I shouldn't say never, is rarely on the forefront within an organization. So it was just showing them, like, hey, here's what we can do with this. Here's why this matters. And then not putting it in someone else's hands, but rather taking it on myself on top of a full time recruitment gig. Right. And that's how I created those transferable opportunities for myself. When I applied for the role at Baxter, I had content to show her, the hiring manager, like, hey, I've done this. I've been doing this. You know what I mean? So it was a really good it was really good alignment because of that. So it's like create your own opportunities, by seeing a need and just doing it.
I think with the recruiting landscape right now and so many recruiters out of work, having and embracing what you just said of creating an opportunity for yourself and then showing what you have done into those interviews because they're always going to ask, what have you been doing lately? And if
Yeah.
you can just say, oh, I've just been applying, or instead of, hey, I've been doing courses online, I have been teaching, I've been speaking at conferences, I have been creating XYZ, exactly what they're looking for. It shows them that you can actually do it at a high level and they don't have to think, well, can this person actually do it? You're showing them and it gives them the content. And in my experience, I would say 90% of candidates don't come to the table with things that they can present or show. I've talked to multiple recruiters in the last, year, and some of the feedback was, yeah, another candidate came with a presentation and showed the leadership team on a specific topic that it was a pain point within the interview process and they got the job over me. I was second, but they showed us something versus me showing something and I didn't get the job. So I think that could be more of a trend moving forward for recruiters, and just maybe even a little advice to have things to show within that interview process.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't just go into this interview and wait for her to ask me for things. I showed her, I was like, hey, check this out. Here's what I've done. Here's the most recent LinkedIn presentation I put together. I had saved, emails. I had saved templates of things that I had created from setting expectations before a phone screen. And that was the work I literally ended up doing in that job, was writing templates for the recruitment team. So that was one of the things, right? So I showed her, here's some of the social media posts I created. Here's copy that I've written. And she didn't have to wait for me to do that, because she had, like, if she didn't ask me or did ask me, like, it didn't matter. Like, I was just like, nope, here it is. And so for someone that, let's say they're thinking, well, I'm not super creative. I don't design. I'm not a great, wordsmith, but I'm really good at analyzing. Maybe you've gone in and you've done ATS implementations. Maybe you are very project management minded and oriented. Those skills transfer to other areas outside of recruitment. So you just have to look at, what did I do on this side with an ATS, how I implemented it, how I managed that project, how many stakeholders were there, how did I analyze the data and use that to be better, to help the recruitment team be better. I mean, tell me how that's not transferable.
I think a lot about interviewing currently right now is understanding how to convey the narrative of your story. I know on your LinkedIn, you said you want to help people tell their story and to make it passionately come to life. Walk us through some tips for the audience of how to convey a great narrative to the hiring managers, to those companies that you're targeting.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand where they're coming from. So let me give an example what I do with my hiring managers when I'm doing an intake. So I have a whole form that was filled with questions that I want to learn about them, about their team, about their company, why they're hiring for this role, right? And so in asking them all these questions, and I don't just give it to them, by the way, to fill out and say, hey, get this back to me. And some people have been like, hey, I'll just fill it out. I'm like, mm-mm, nope. We're going to have a live conversation about this, because one of my superpowers is the way that I listen, the way that the things that I hear, and then in translating that into then the story that I tell, and especially when I'm writing job ads for people. So one of the things, and a very specific example, is I'm working with a pest control company, like a premier service pest control company. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've never recruited a pest control. Like, how am I going to talk about this in a unique way? And one of the things I heard the hiring manager say was, basically, nobody grows up and wants to be in pest control. So guess what? The first sentence of the job ad was, hey, I bet you didn't grow up thinking you were going to land in a pest control company, but da 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 da. Like, it's just listening for things that, like, he never would have put that on the intake form if I had just given it him to fill it out. So it's having real conversations, being at Baxter and doing employer branding there. I was constantly looking for stories, employee stories, so we could tell the truth internally and externally. And I got so excited when people talked about the challenges too, because oftentimes in employer branding, recruitment marketing, you just want to tell, like, the fuzzy rainbow and sunshine version of your company. But we know that's not the reality day to day. So show the warmth, tell some of the challenges, because I promise you that the challenge that you're telling is right for someone. It's not right for everyone. So, there's a negative to every positive anyway. One thing that James Ellis, employer branding expert, that he talks about, is just that. You could say, oh, great, you're like a high growth, innovative company. But guess what? What comes along with that? Probably longer working days, maybe higher stress levels, there's a lot of things. So it's calling out the positives and the negatives, which also adds more credibility.
There's a lot of imposter syndrome of speaking your mind and being true to yourself on social media platforms in interviews. What would you tell the audience of overcoming the psychological good, bad, ugly on imposter syndrome and how that sinks in when you're either actively looking for a job or taking on a new role, wanting to take a leap of faith and maybe speak at a conference or doing some of these different things.
Do the damn thing. Honestly, I say it to my friends all the time, and I have to say it to myself. I just applied to speak at RecFest. I have no idea if I'm going to get chosen, and I'm a little queasy when I think about the fact if I get the email that I was chosen, because I'm like, I just got chills even thinking about it. Because I've done some public speaking, and I do a lot of speaking on LinkedIn, and I do podcasts, and I'm a very relational person. But the thought of standing up on stage where maybe multiple thousands of people are watching, a little nerve-wracking. So I don't know the outcome, but I'm always trying to push myself outside and overcome, limiting beliefs, which I believe is really where imposter syndrome sets in, right? It's those limiting beliefs that we have in ourselves. But I find that more good than bad comes from going for it. And so it really becomes a mindset shift at that point. And I think that's something, it takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight, but if you can get it to click that I can do anything my brain says that I can, then I think that people start to care a little bit less about maybe what other people are going to think or putting themselves out there. Like I posted on LinkedIn for everyone to see that I applied for this speaking opportunity. I promised that I would update no matter what the outcome was. So there's a very real possibility that in a handful of weeks from now, I will go back to my network, my community, and say, hey, I wasn't chosen for this role. But if that's the case, I'm okay with that because I want people to see that what you do, it shouldn't be contingent on the outcome, right? Like the shirt I wore today was very intentional. Trust the process. Stay married to the process, divorce of the outcome. When we do that in recruitment, we do that in the things that we strive for in this life. In my opinion, we live a much better life.
I love how you brought up Wreckfest. And if Wreckfest, if you're listening, make sure that Tabitha is speaking at your conference. You're not going to regret it. Because I think she has a lot of insight and a lot of experiences that she can share. Collectively, we elevate each other's by sharing our experiences that we've had in our lives. And she has a great story that she can tell to impact the recruiting community for years to come. No two upbringings or environments are alike. And I think people need to hear her story because it's going to make an impact. If you're listening, you see this, put her on the speaking list. How do you see recruiting? How has it changed over the last, 24 months?
Well, I mean, the big one is just shifting from more of a candidate driven market to an employer driven market again, which I feel like the experience goes away a little bit, kind of all around, internally and externally when the market shifts. Because again, you're seeing an influx of applications and maybe interest in your company that you didn't have before. Maybe you don't have the right number of recruiters to handle that volume. So again, like the experience goes down everywhere, including the recruiters who are sitting in that seat having to handle all that influx and that volume. There's always going to be a million different tools to choose from out there for recruiters to use. And I just think it's all about keeping it simple at the end of the day. Always going back to that relationship driven, employer branding, personal branding type of approach. When you take care of your people and every person that you come across, people remember that. I get referrals from people all the time that are like, hey, so and so referred me to you. And I'm like, oh, who is the person that I don't even know the name of that person? Maybe I never even talked to that person, but they saw my content and they've been following me for years and I had no idea. So like that's why I say the follower count and all that I don't care about because it just comes down to that impact. And when you impact, the right things happen. So I mean, listen, we know the recruitment market, field, industry, it's always changing. So for me, it's always just figuring out where can I insert myself to elevate it. And that's been a consistent goal of mine is to make it better. That's something I recently started doing. I'm co-hosting that we launched called Rise of the Recruiter. And it is that collective elevation you were just talking about. We all come from different backgrounds. You come from such a different recruitment background than I do. And yet we still share so many of the same values, but it's all about learning from each other's mess ups. I hope that my mistake yesterday will prevent someone else from making that mistake tomorrow. And when we share share those lived experiences like you talked about, that's where we become better as a profession. None of us went to college for this. So it's just about being there for each other. And that's why I always say recruitment is a team sport. It works better when we play well together in the sandbox. So
What advice would you offer to individuals who are just starting their journey into the recruiting field?
come in with the right intentions, be ready for things to change a lot. I think in the first even year of doing it, you're going to realize if this is something, if it's sticky for you, if this is something you really want to do. I remember one of my first leaders told me that, even within like the first 4 months, he was like, we're going to know pretty quickly if this is something that you want to do or not. So I'm kind of curious with this market to see how many people actually stick with it or come back to it versus people that are like the juice isn't worth the squeeze type of mentality. So yeah, just coming in, I do think that as a recruiter, you should care. I think you should be pretty well versed in communication, whether it's with candidates, hiring managers, even just being honest with yourself. Because I know this industry, this position, this role has taught me to have hard conversations. And that extended to my personal life and made me a better communicator all around. So I just think like if you want to be elevated in that way, come into this trying to do it right from the get go. And if you don't have a leader that is being supportive and teaching you those right things, it is again, surround yourself with other recruiters who can help you by sharing their lived experiences. And that's what I think you need to do, whether you're a new recruiter or a seasoned recruiter, is find those trustworthy people, um, you know, that you can use to help along your career.
It's all about surrounding yourself with those people that will elevate you. There's people in the room that suck the air out of the room, and there's also people that lift you up when you need it the most and then challenge you when you need it the most. Who comes to mind in your experience, whether it's company wide, personally, professionally, that's really gave you the encouragement when you needed and then challenged you when you needed it the most?
Yeah, I mean, that one's always an easy answer for me, and it's been a lot of people, I will say that. The first person that always comes to mind is Chuck Hutzel. He's probably not a name that everyone knows because he's not big on LinkedIn, but he was the leader that gave me my first chance at recruitment in agency 7 years ago. The leader that saw something in me, that saw that I had been through a very crazy personal challenge and knew that that would translate to the work world, and he has constantly pushed me to be better. He has encouraged me to be myself. He's just an incredible leader. He was never, and still to this day, we keep in touch. He's never been afraid to keep it real with me. And I appreciate that. I know that when I want to hear the truth, I can go to him. And that's exactly what he's going to give me. He moved from agency to corporate after about 17 years in agency and went over to the corporate side, brought me with him, so hired me back a second time, and I would work for that man again any day.
He probably hired you because you probably have some top level attributes a recruiter has. What do you think in the world of 2024, the top 3 attributes a top level recruiter needs to have to be successful?
Grit, for sure, number 1, 'cause you can never give up in this industry because 'cause you're gonna get kicked. It's time and time again, right? So definitely grit. Communication, the willingness to communicate, understanding how to do that, really just keeping in touch with everyone involved in the situation. So grit, communication, and transparency, the willingness to always tell the truth. I think at the end of the day, if you can have those attributes and do those things, you're going to be successful in recruitment.
How has being transparent helped your career within recruiting?
I mean, one word is trust. I mean, hiring managers and candidates alike have always known they can trust me. They come in, I set clear expectations. I communicate with them throughout the process. I give them the hard news. Those things always lead to long-term relationships. It's why when I got laid off in recruitment and some of my past hiring managers found out, they were calling me like, I know you don't work in customer success roles, but we think you'd be great in this. Like, come join us on our customer success team. Cause I helped staff their customer success team before. So it always leads to that. I'd rather be respected than liked. When you can be both, I think that's great. But I think telling the truth always leads to respect when you do it with an empathetic approach.
The best part about staying true to who you are, you don't have to remember of what you're not and what you have to act like. The quote I always heard was, "The best part of telling the truth is you don't have to remember the lie." And I
Oh,
think sometimes on social media, there's individuals out there that are just trying to get the follows and the likes. Is there anybody that you respect, that you're following, that pushes out good content, that makes you think about the industry a little bit different, or really helps you out? Somebody that has 45,000 followers, who do you follow? And how do you determine who to and who not to follow?
oh, that's a good question. It's very loaded. Like I put out different kinds of content on LinkedIn, so I kind of gravitate towards people that do the same things that resonate with me. I mean, someone that immediately came to mind when you asked me that question is Richard King. Richard King came from the gaming industry for a long time, and of course, gaming, is changing a lot of layoffs in that area. And so when he got laid off a handful of years ago, he started his own recruitment agency, and now together we do the brutally honest resume feedback sessions and help job seekers. And he comes to mind because he always keeps it real. He's not afraid to call out, like, this is what the industry looks like right now. This is what hiring looks like right now. If you're so set on a remote role, look at the numbers, you know, and he puts out real information that people can lead on and tells it to you straight. You might not want to hear this, but here's the reality of where we are right now in this market. Here are the things you need to be thinking about. So I always appreciate that approach, for sure. Someone else that comes to mind is Josh Braun. He's a leader in the sales space and actually gives really good examples of just different sales scenarios from like sitting at a restaurant with his wife at dinner to like just some of the pitches that he gets in his email and like breaking them down and why they're good, why they're not, why he responded and took a meeting versus why he didn't. So I'm able to take his posts a lot and relate them to the recruitment industry. And then I also love to follow copywriters. So I'm blanking on some of the names right now, but there's some really great copywriters on LinkedIn that are just, they give the best examples. And because I love to write and I'm always trying to hone that craft, that's a great place, I think, for recruiters that like to write or that are trying to get better in that area, especially if you're writing job ads, not job descriptions, job ads. Then those copywriting skills really, really come into play. So, and then beyond that, I just love following career coaches and other recruiters who are just constantly up leveling the industry and the people around them. And the last person I'll mention is Sarah Johnston. She's a career coach, executive resume writer, over 1 million followers on LinkedIn. And I've known her for 7 years now, long before she had that many followers, but she has consistently put out really, really great content. She has an amazing newsletter. She always curates the best information and brings it all together. And so, yeah, those are some of the people that inspire me and that I follow.
Love it. Let's switch to the quick fire questions. Is there a morning routine you do to kick off your day to have a positive outlook on life?
One thing that remains the same every single day is that right before my feet hit the floor, when I wake up and realize I've taken my first breath, I'm just thankful that I woke up again. And I ask God for the opportunity to put me in the right place at the right time. So I meet the right individuals to either impact them to be impacted or maybe both. And oftentimes that's the case is both. So that remains the same every single day. Is just trying to lead with that mentality of like, who can I help today? And then the rest of the day kind of takes care of itself.
Any favorite book that comes to mind?
I even have it here with me. Talent Chooses You by James Ellis. It's an employer branding book and it talks about how you can hire better with employer branding. So he's one of my favorite voices and I have all of his employer branding books. I would recommend any one of them.
Any specific advice on work-life balance and how you put that to the forefront of everything you do?
Yeah, I'm really lucky to work for a company that is kind of like get your work done whenever you get it done, however you get it done. If I'm sitting in my car or sitting at home or traveling across the country, it makes no difference. So for me, it's just been about setting boundaries and actually having a contract that required me to stop at 40 hours every week really taught me that. Going into another role after that, I'm like, well, I got used to stopping at 40 hours. So while I'm not saying I'll always stop at 40, I just know that I work really hard when I'm working. So when I'm not, I learned to tell people if I'm on vacation, please respect that boundary. If I check in, it's one thing, but otherwise, like, don't expect to hear from me. Don't expect to get an answer from me. And so setting that boundary all the time. And one quick example I have about that was when I worked for a past company, my boss said she was going to go on vacation and she was like, I'll bring my laptop. And I said, listen, if you bring your laptop, you can do whatever you want, but if you bring your laptop and work, you're gonna make me feel like that's what I have to do when I go on vacation. And the spirit of setting a good example for your team, which I know you always want to do, and you tell us that, like, can you leave your laptop at home? And she did. And that felt so validating for me. And I think she felt better about it too. I think also setting that example for the people around you for like what you expect them to do. And so those are some of the ways that I handle the work life balance.
Love it. Last question. As you reflect on your whole career and your whole life, what is the proudest accomplishment that comes to mind?
Betting on myself when it came to recruitment. I don't want to boast about the things. I think I've been very fortunate to be in this position to use my skills that has become my purpose in this life. But if I didn't face plan into recruitment, then I think about all of the people along the way that have told me that I have helped them and that I have been able to impact and also that have impacted me. None of those things would have happened. So I would say like I feel very accomplished that I chose this profession, even though it was later in life and that I've stuck with it and that I have no intentions of leaving it ever. I mean, I will die as a recruiter. So that is the plan and something that I'm very proud of is just being able to leave each person, better.
I'll put in the show notes, your LinkedIn profile, some of the things like you're doing is like the rise of the recruiter and some of the other events that you're hosting. But how else can somebody get a hold of you and what's going on in the next couple of weeks that you're involved with?
Best way really is LinkedIn. I kind of keep it simple. I don't have a ton of social media accounts all over the place. I really focus on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me, best place is there. Coming up, we're going to be having some webinars and workshops through the Sales Collective where I'm going to be teaching people the recruitment process and how to lead a competency based interviewing, strategies and things like that in the sales realm. That can definitely transition and transfer over to job seekers looking to kind of get a peek behind the curtain. And then ask a recruiter if you're a job seeker looking for some support. Again, as recruitment is a team sport, the other half of that is job search as a team sport. So anyone that might want to come and learn from recruiters, ask us literally anything. So those are some of the things I'm working on. And then crossing fingers that maybe get chosen for Rec Fest. But even if I don't get chosen, I am still going to be in Nashville for my first Rec Fest in the US. So I'm very excited about that and hope to meet some of you there.
Awesome. Any last minute words for the audience as we wrap up?
Just to believe in yourself whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? There's too many people out there telling us that we can't. So just, get that in your brain that there's something really cool about you that you bring to this life. Um, and one of the things that I remember then is the Irma Bombeck quote. Um, when basically, and I'm gonna mess it up because I suck at memorizing quotes sometimes, but it's, when I get to the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and could say I used everything you gave me. And that is one of my biggest goals to do. And one of the things that I want to leave people with is use up your talent. Use everything you've been given. So at the end, you could say, I've got nothing left because I gave it all. And your life will be so, so, so much better for it.
It's so funny. My dad would work, 10, 12, 14-hour days, and he would come home, play with us, get in his bed, and he would just be zonked out. And he said, if you're not tired by the end of the day and ready to go to bed, you haven't done enough throughout the day.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind when you rest your head and say, what did I accomplish today and who did I impact? And it's really cool that we've connected because you kind of have that same mentality. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. To the audience, if you want to get more involved, feel free to join the Hires community and connect with Tabitha. She has a wealth of knowledge that's building a legacy for years to come. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. And I'm so glad that this life brought us together to, and can't wait to see what the future holds.